Judge!
Hello, and welcome to the Cinema Judge. To all my regulars out there, you guys are flipping awesome. Thanks for tuning in every week. I truly appreciate it. Now, if you're new to the show, let me briefly tell you what we do here. We love movies. We like to share movies with you. We're not here to yell at Hollywood, yell at actors, none of that stuff. Leave that to the professionals. This is like a movie oasis, a place where you could come and learn about one particular movie. That's it. The studios, they send me interviews, on-the-set footage, behind-the-scenes stuff. I put it together as the judge and give it to you, the jury, and you make up your own mind if you want to see this movie or not. Because any movie is somebody's favorite movie. I'm not going to sit here and tell you not to see a movie. I might tell you I would suggest it or I liked it, but who am I to tell you not to see a movie? We all come down a different path of life. I don't know what your road trip is, what got you to where you are now, and vice versa. That's the joy. That's what we like to do here. Because it's a noisy world out there. We all know it. We all have problems. The world has problems. This is what I've always wanted this show to be. A little bubble. A bubble where you could come here and just go, I want to escape everything and learn about whatever movie we're talking about that week. That's my goal here. And that's what I hope you get out of it. Because essentially, we all want to spend our hard-earned money wisely. Because we want the same thing. An enjoyable movie experience. Now, approaching the bench today, we have Spoiler Alert. It stars Jim Parsons, and you know him from Big Bang Theory. But this is a comedy drama. And here's the story in a nutshell. This is based on a true story. Here it is. I'm going to just read it from here. This is the story of Michael Ausiello and Kit Cowan's relationship that takes a tragic turn when Cowan is diagnosed with terminal cancer. Yes, can it be sometimes a heavy issue? But this is the kind of movie that tries to intersplice comedy and drama. Because obviously this kind of situation can get messy and ugly. And especially since it's based on a true story, I can't even imagine, I talk about this later, I'm sure I will, about playing somebody in real life and then that person's on set. I mean, that must be nuts. And that's what Jim Parsons had to do. He had to play the guy who wrote this book. He started off as Facebook posts years ago. Then after his husband died, they contacted him and said, would you be interested in making this into a book? So that's the rundown of this particular episode. Spoiler alert. Here's the trailer.
Middle child, 2 brothers. We're actually very close, but they live in different states.
Only child.
Childhood obsessions.
Christmas, magic.
I want you to hold me. Come and lay.
My name is Michael.
You're a great dancer. You're a terrible liar.
And that's Kit. I've always imagined that my life was like a typical romantic comedy.
You were so confident. I mean, you just ripped off your clothes like you're a stripper at a bachelorette party. And I basically shower with clothes on. I'll just shut up now.
Shall we go to your place tonight?
Here's my door. Before we go in, just open the door. Okay. What is this, Michael? Oh, you don't want to...
Oh my God, they're in here too.
Oh, Papa.
You turn my sixes to nine.
I think you're very cool, and I'm worried that you're going to break my heart.
Mom and Dad, this is my friend, Mike.
A friend?
Yes, Mom, just a friend.
What is going on here? Who is this guy?
He's my boyfriend.
Your boyfriend?
I think it's a great kid.
We may not look like it, but we are actually kind of hip.
Oh my God.
We were gonna go to Woodstock, you know.
Slam.
I am.
Let's just take a moment to appreciate this beauty.
All I wanna be.
Kit, what is going on? Are you all right?
Calm down off the ledge, Mike. I'm seeing a doctor tomorrow.
I've been having dreams.
I'm afraid the news isn't good.
Forever and forever if we're not together.
I was always afraid Kit would break my heart, and eventually he did. He broke it open.
I've only got one life, and I want you in it.
You have to run the race in front of you because that's all there is.
Looking back, this is less of a rom-com and more of a love story. He can't sit for 4 hours. We promised bed.
All the beds are occupied.
Get my husband to bed!
Well, that was Oscar worthy.
Work for Shirley MacLaine. I'm
sorry I never told you how good your ass looks in your khaki pants. I was afraid if you understood how beautiful you are that you'd leave me.
Thank you for inviting us.
It was Kit's idea. I was vehemently opposed to it.
And like all love stories, it never actually ends.
And as you could tell by that trailer, it has a lot going on, a lot of emotions. Because in this kind of story, it gets messy. Because in any relationship, we all know when things get stressful, things can break down. And they cover that in this movie about how at some points of the relationship, they went their separate ways. And how they work through that. Again, it's funny in parts, but it's also a very powerful drama. Now up first, we're going to hear from the guy who wrote the book. And he's going to talk about how that whole process started, about when they first started documenting his illness. They were doing it on like a Facebook page amongst their small little group of friends. And he talks about just how that evolved after the death of his husband. And then right after that, we're going to hear from Jim Parsons, who plays Michael, the guy who wrote the book. And he's going to talk about what struck him about this story.
A couple months after Kit died, I was actually approached from an editor at Simon & Schuster who had followed some of the story on social media. Kit and I had been sharing, documenting the cancer journey on Facebook amongst a close-knit group of friends, and one of them was an acquaintance at Simon & Schuster who had been following it. And a couple months after Kit died, he approached me and he said, "Would you ever give any thought to turning this into a book?" Because he was really moved by the story. And I hadn't really given much thought to it because I was still grieving. It was just a couple months after his death. But it got me thinking about, what an extraordinary opportunity it would be to introduce Kit to, thousands, potentially millions of people and let them get to know him. Spoiler alert, the hero dies. Basically tells the story of my 13-and-a-half-year relationship with my late husband, Kit, and with a focus on the last year of his life, his cancer diagnosis through to his death. It's really concentrated on those 11 months, but we go back through the book to, sort of glimpses, flashbacks to our relationship together, the good times, the bad times, the really messy times.
What struck me about the story, well, there's a couple of things, and one of them was just Michael Ausiello wrote in such a honest, humorous, truthful way that it was hard not to be moved by the material in general, but specifically for me, the relationship he had with his partner, eventual husband, had so many echoes of my own experience and life with my own husband. Some of them a little uncanny, like we met around the same time and in the same city as Michael and Kit did, me and my husband did. We had been together for about the exact amount of time because of that. And there were just a lot of, maybe for a lot of gay men of around that age, there'd be a lot in common life-wise. But it was very, very easy, without even trying, to put myself in his shoes and take that journey that they were forced to go on. In a very macro level, it's about how you have to put yourself out there and in a place where you might get your heart broken if you're going to feel the real richness that life has to offer in the form of love, in the form of experience. And that, in fact, I'm not sure it's possible to live the full life that you were brought on this earth to live without suffering heartbreak. That's kind of the macro story, in my opinion. In specific, we look into that macro through the lens of these two men who get into a relationship, and it's not necessarily storybook. It's very real and relatable, and fate throws them a major curveball.
Now up next, we're going to hear from Ben Aldridge. He plays Kit. Now, you probably know him from Our Girl, that from 2013 to 2018, Fleabag, and Pennyworth, that ran from 2019 to 2022. But real quick, back to Fleabag. It is a must watch. It is an incredible show. When you have time or make time, Fleabag. But now, in his interview, he talks about the story. And then he also talks about his character, where he's at this point in their lives. Because he's young, he's just living life. But at the very beginning of the interview, I love it, he talks about the aughts, or what they call it in the United States, compared to what they call it in England. It's just a fun little moment, and I don't know why it's important, but it's funny to me. But then after that, Jim Parsons talks about his character, of where Michael is. So they're both talking about where each character is when they first meet.
It's a love story. It's about two guys meeting in the early noughts, as you guys call it. We call it the noughties in the UK, which I think is cheekier and sexier. But in the aughts, do you guys like the aughts or the noughts? One of those. And it really is just chronicling their relationship, them getting to know each other, the things that any relationship goes through in terms of being tested and finding out how you fit together, and those awkward moments, those moments of growth. And then Kit is diagnosed with cancer, and that obviously has a huge impact on their relationship. At the beginning of the film, I think Kit is kind of that mid-20s, kind of not quite, kind of knowing what you want to do, but not quite there yet. He's got a day job, which is like a bit creative, but working for Cosi, doing their signage. He isn't making a living from his art, which like so many artists don't get an opportunity to do. So I think he's got a little bit of like awkwardness and embarrassment about that. And in terms of like relationships, I think he's like out on the town, he's on the apps. He hasn't had a significant relationship up to that point. He's having probably a lot of fun, casual sex. And yeah, meeting Michael is kind of a real shift for him in his life, I think. But he's kind of just like doing what most people are doing in their 20s, I think, is kind of finding out who they are and all of that.
Michael is a TV journalist. He writes about TV, and it's his passion. He grew up with TV as a very close friend. He grew up writing fan fiction before I'd think there was even a term for fan fiction. And work has really driven his life. Partly because he's passionate about it. I think partly because he very early in life suffered a major heartbreak with the loss of his mother. And due to the feeling of how unexpectedly life can change and quickly, and not necessarily for the better at first glance, he is very interested in controlling things and making sure that he's got control over his situations. And that makes it challenging to fall in love and start a relationship, because you really can't control that other person ultimately. And so when we start the film, that's kind of where he's at, and he chooses to take the journey of falling in love and the loss of control that causes.
We have the author up next, and he talks about how he feels Jim Parsons even made him even more interesting than he really was. And it's really fun to hear that from an author, saying that, hey, I'm glad this guy did my job, or he's playing me because he's making me look better than I was, or how he sees himself. It's just kind of a fun little moment. But then after that, we're going to go right into a clip. And in this clip, we have Michael and Kit. They're at Kit's house, and Kit is showing Michael a name in the closet saying that this is your spot. So it's one of those little emotional scenes of, it's all saying, oh, thanks a lot for the spot. And then it all comes down to who says I love you first. And I think we've all been there. The first time you throw that bad boy out there, it's scary. We've been there. It's not always pretty. But here's first interview and then the movie clip.
As I watch it, I'm like, Jim is, bringing things to my life and this story that I couldn't have even imagined possible, and illuminating the character in new and exciting ways, and at times making me maybe more interesting than I actually am.
Ta-da! Your very own closet space.
Did you make that?
I did. You can put your sleep shorts here, and you can hang your pants on a hanger. Put them here, and your wallet and your keys in the sundries box.
That's where the sundries go.
Merry Christmas. You're staring at me.
Yes.
I love you.
What the hell? Oh, that was my line.
Well, you hesitated. You said you lose.
I did not hesitate. I was giving the words room to breathe.
Well, let the record show I said it first.
No, Kit, at the very least, we've said it at the same time.
That's not what the record shows.
And again, that's just a fun, cute scene. It kind of just sets up what that relationship was like. And speaking of that, how they were quirky and fun. That's what the next interview talks about. Ben Aldridge, who plays Kit, talks about the differences between the two characters and what they do to each other and how they lack of a better word, complete each other, all that kind of jazz. But he talks about how they work together. And after that, Jim Parsons also touches on that, talking about how different the characters are and what each one brings to the relationship.
I think they develop this relationship, just as we all do, that they find real common ground and real safety in being understood and being seen by someone else. And I think they are a little eccentric and a little, I hate this word, quirky, but they're a little, and I think they have this real shared sense of humor and naughtiness and cheekiness. And I think they kind of show each other in their own ways how to relax a little more. I think they're both slightly tightly wound on different subjects, but I think they help each other in that way. I think they're both quite neurotic, but about different things, and they kind of like relax each other, I would say, and make a good team.
Kit was more free-flowing as an artist and a little more less focused about career, less driven, I would say, than Michael. And I think in many ways that they complemented each other in that way, because Michael was, laser focused. And I think everybody needs balance in that way. I know that also caused conflict. I think that, Michael wished Kit would do more and buckle down more in that way. And Kit wished that Michael wouldn't be quite so married to his job. And then Kit had a very loving family, and Michael's family was, both of his parents were gone by this point. And that was another major gift that Kit gave to Michael. And one of the things that in real life and in the movie that Michael thanks him for is, thank you for giving me a family.
Ben Aldridge is up next, the guy who plays Kit. He talks about, at a certain point in this movie, they're on a break. And it's during that break, he receives the cancer diagnosis. And he talks about how that one moment really altered their whole relationship and made them realize really how they feel.
When they first get the cancer diagnosis, they're actually on a break. They've hit this point in their relationship where they're seeing a couples counselor, a couples therapist, and it's not quite working in the way that they want it to. So they're kind of in this moment of considering what they want to be, and they're spending time living apart. And I think what the diagnosis does is bring them back together in a very intense way, because they realize that they love each other, but that they need each other, and that Kit needs Michael through that time. And I think it deepens their love. I think I can only imagine that helping someone through that, supporting them through that, and seeing someone at their most vulnerable would deepen that connection, and they're really tested by it, I think.
We're going to hear from Jim Parsons next, and he's just going to talk about how much he enjoyed working with Ben Aldridge, the guy who plays Kit.
Ben was just a dream to have, to work with in general. he brought such a love and depth and charisma to the character of Kit. I think he shares a similar curiosity and love for all creative arts the way Kit did. I have to tell you, for me personally, the greatest gift of all was that he was the right person for the role. And in addition to that, I didn't know him beforehand. It was so rewarding and I think important for this project that we were two people off camera and on camera getting to know each other at the same time that these two characters were getting to know each other.
Now, this next interview, when I first heard it, I just cracked up. I couldn't believe it. He says it tongue-in-cheek, but it's still funny, and I wonder if there's any truth in it, or is he just being a wise guy? Because in this next interview, we're going to hear from the author, and he's sitting next to Jim Parsons, and he's talking about how much he felt Ben Aldridge just in certain moments really encompassed Kit. And sometimes it was spooky for him, but cool, and but knowing that he was a perfect one for the role. But then something comes up at the end of the interview about Jim Parsons says, I never met Kit. And at that point, it's kind of funny.
For me, it's how physically he resembled Kit, which was a little weird at times, but in the best possible way. There's certain angles of Ben where I looked at him and it was like I saw Kit in him, and then also in his performance and in his mannerisms and his approach to certain lines and just an overall essence. Like he was very, and is in many ways very Kit-like.
Yeah, it's funny. I never met Kit in person.
It's because he wasn't a fan.
Because he wasn't a fan.
I kept you guys apart as far as possible.
Well, whatever the cruel reason, I never met Kit as in real life. But picture-wise, and your very vivid descriptions in the book about what he's like, everybody could see the overlap in, I think that Ben and Kit have more in common on the superficial level that we were talking about in some ways. And I guess related to that, for me, there was so much kindness and charisma in what he did. It felt easy to join forces with him.
See what I'm saying? For whatever reason, when he says he wasn't a fan, and Jim's like, whatever cruel reason, and you just wonder, was he just being a wise guy? Or was there any sliver of truth in that? But either way, saying that to like a superstar about somebody that was part of your life, and because obviously we all as people, not just actors, we all have ego and pride. So if somebody says to you, somebody that they knew, they weren't a fan, I'll be like, oh, ouch. Again, it has probably no merit. It just cracked me up when I heard it. But coming up next, we're going to hear from Ben Aldridge, who plays Kit, and he's going to talk about what a pleasure it was working with Jim Parsons. And then on that same note, we're going to go to the author, and he also talks about working with Jim Parsons and just being a professional and just so skilled and just being so focused on making a good project.
I just felt so lucky to be working with Jim, and Jim cares for this film and the script and this story so much, and it has such passion for telling the story authentically and for playing Michael authentically, and also just a real desire to connect to it in a way that we understood it as actors. I've never felt anyone believe in me as much as I felt Jim believed in me.
In addition to being a really nice guy, Jim is also incredibly smart, and he surrounds himself with really smart people. So when That's Wonderful Productions approached me about potentially optioning the book, in many ways it was just a no-brainer, because I felt like, a story this personal, it needed to be in the hands of people I trust and respect. And I think that speaks to Jim and his company.
Now, coming up next, we're going to hear from the author a little bit more, talking about how much he's had a long relationship with Jim Parsons. He used to interview him a lot, or he'd have to go over to his place to get interviews. So he was in his circle, if you will. So he talks about that past relationship and how it made it a lot more comfortable having him heading this project. And then right after that, we're going to go into another movie clip. Now, in this movie clip, Jim Parsons, he's at the hospital, and he's talking to the nurse behind the desk, and he's throwing a fit. Just, give my husband a bed. And then after he yells, and this shows what kind of balance this movie tries to make. There's a real powerful scene. He's yelling at this nurse, and then he kind of pauses, and then there's a little bit of a space. And during that space, he's walking back to his husband. And then they have that brief conversation. And the levity in that conversation, because you could see two people in real life just trying to make light of a situation where it's heavy, and he just blew a gasket. And then all of a sudden, here he is standing in front of you, and it's like, smooth move.
Jim and I have known each other for a while. Professionally, I've been interviewing him on red carpets, and sometimes he'd come into the studio and I'd do interviews with him. And instantly we had a rapport. And I think that's because we have a shared sensibility in terms of not taking anything too seriously. And I think that's what I connected with Jim about was it was just fun to be around him. There was no pretense. He was playful, but he was also snarky. And it was just immediately there was an ease between the two of us.
We promised a bed.
All the beds are occupied today.
I don't care where you have to go and find one. I don't care if you have to drive to IKEA and buy one. I don't care if you have to go to Jennifer Convertibles. Give my husband a bed!
Okay, sir. Okay. We'll find your husband a bed.
Thank you. Well, that was Oscar-worthy. You worked for Shirley MacLaine.
And again, I love that balance because we all know, we've all been in a situation where you could be in a heated situation, uncomfortable environment, but then when you're with that certain somebody, you could still turn that embarrassing moment into just like an inside joke of like, all right, you completely dropped the ball there, buddy. But hey, let's just roll with it. It is what it is. So it's just that little dose of reality that they show that, and I think that's kind of cool. Now, up next, we're going to hear from the writer, the guy who wrote the book, and he talks about the difference between movie Michael, aka him, and him in real life. And it's just fun to hear him talk about him as another entity, because the character like Jim isn't playing a carbon copy. He's just doing a version of him, but then hearing him talk about that, it's just kind of fun.
Movie Michael there's a maybe more of an outward sort of sweetness and vulnerability to him. I think I'm more of like, I think in a protective shell a lot. So I don't let people see, vulnerability, even like sweetness, anger, any kind of, like I'm very controlled with my emotions. Movie Michael, I think, doesn't have maybe as many hang-ups in that department.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
I think that's very fair. I think that's a combination of me being me as an actor, but also the movie we put together, I guess, called for that.
And this was, like, in my mind, I never was like, whoever plays me, it has to be an imitation. Like, especially when we got Jim, I think one of the exciting things was I couldn't wait to see what he brought to this role. That surprised me and that was interesting. And I knew that he would create his own Michael, and he did.
Now, like most of you know, if you listen to the show enough, I love it when you get this little sliver of finding a director, writer, anybody, that little behind the scenes moment of what they were thinking, how they're trying to do this, and what kind of director they're looking for. And a lot of times they're thinking, there's no way we could get this guy. We can't do it. And just, hearing that reality, that thing of even people on the level of Jim Parsons and people that ilk can still have doubts and feel insecure about it. Because in this next interview, Jim talks about that, about could they even get Michael Showalter? And that's a big if. Because if you don't know, he did the incredibly good movie from 2017, The Big Sick, that dealt with similar issues. So could you or would he? Because he has the skills, he has the talent to tackle this in the proper way. Because this is the kind of movie you have to walk that fine line between comedy and drama, and both stories being based on a true story. How do you walk that line? And he's already proven himself that he could do it. So it's like, can we get him? And then right after that, we're going to hear from Ben Aldridge, who plays Kit. And he's going to talk about also working with Michael Showalter, the incredibly talented director, and talks about the freedom that he gave and how it felt to be on the set with him.
I have to tell you, first off, the Michael Showalter of it all was my first dream come true. Sally was the second one, but I only had that dream because of Showalter. When we optioned the material, we were talking about what directors we would love to have work on this. And the first one we had was Showalter. But we really thought we'd need like a Showalter type, because he had done The Big Sick, which we were like, I don't know if he wants to revisit, it's not that it's the same material, but like, does he want a couple where there's somebody sick again? But we're like, he understands how to do this. He understands how to do what you might call like a laugh cry. Like, he knows comedy and he knows joyousness and he knows the depths of human suffering in his work at the same time. So we were like, well, we'll figure out who's like that. And then it got announced in the trades that we had optioned the material. And lo and behold, his office called and was like, do you have a director? We were like, no, why? And they're like, Michael's interested. And we were like, you've got to be kidding. So that started that train running. And then we went into pre-production. And I said so many times, Michael Showalter must be the most confident in himself director out there, because his ability to collaborate, I don't know if it's his improv background or what, he never says no. He always says yes and tries it out and sees where it goes. And a lot of times it ends up a no, like, no, that doesn't work. But there was little to nothing you could throw at him idea-wise that he wouldn't see through to some sort of end.
I think Michael Showalter is like the perfect person to direct this, because it fits with his body of work already, but also if Jim and I were like so emotional all the time on set, Michael is not sentimental, and he has his eyes on the prize on making a good film and it not being indulgent. And I think he was the perfect balance in his kind of energy and his brightness. Not that we were ever, we were always having fun. We weren't there depressed, but he was just such a perfect complement, I think, to what Jim and I were bringing, and also the perfect person to steer the film. And he's such a collaborator as well. I've never worked so collaboratively in terms of him really wanting your input as an actor. Like, so often you will hear someone kind of pretend that they want to know how an actor is feeling about it or how the lines are feeling, and Michael really does want to know. It's genuine. Like, I think a lot of the time people don't really want to hear what actors are thinking. They're a bit like, just say it, just do what's on the page. But this truly was kind of like making sure we all felt connected to it, that we were all saying the right thing.
Now, we have a couple really cool interviews coming up next. First, Jim Parsons. He's going to talk about why spoiler alert is so important. And then we're going to go talk to the author. And the author talks about when they were shooting this on set, how much time has passed, so he's able to separate himself a little bit from this piece and not see it as a documentary, just as great artist creating moments in parts of his life. And that must be so weird, watching moments that you lived through being presented right in front of you, because you remember that happening. And it must be, really intense. But I suppose after time moves on, you're able to separate yourself from it. And now that you've been working on a project for so long, you just say, okay, this is just what it is. We're just trying to get the basic feel of this movie across. And then after that, Jim Parsons also elaborates when he was making this role, he had to make sure he didn't put himself too much into what Michael was feeling. He had to still just create a role, a character, and not just totally throw himself into the emotions that he must feel or what he was feeling, because then that'd become a distraction. These are some really good interviews.
Why I think spoiler alert is important is because it's a real honest look at the highs and lows of a relationship and the really rocky terrain one just naturally travels in life if you live a full life and allow yourself to love and be loved. It's going to hurt. And this may sound cheesy, but it is the kind of thing where in that hurt you realize how fortunate you are to be able to feel. And if you can feel the hurt, you can also feel the elation. And I think this story is very much about that. I even think in the hardest parts, if you want to call it that, of this story, of this film, I think you pick up on that the severe pain is laced with severe joy at being alive, at being loved, at loving.
It was emotional at times, but not because I felt like I was being taken back to painful parts of my life and now it's being relived in front of me. It was because the work being done was just so good. I was just so in the moment and enjoying these performances, and just as a viewer, as someone who was just watching this experience unfold before me, I was moved by it. And sometimes, there was difficult scenes being shot, and I was moved by those. But it wasn't never like, oh, this is really tough going back here. Right. It wasn't like we were shooting a documentary, but it was watching like these incredible artists play out these scenes, and some of them were emotionally wrenching to watch. The first time I saw Jim playing me, it was surreal. It was like, I can't believe this is happening. I'm sitting here looking into a monitor, watching Jim Parsons, play the story of my life. It was honestly, I felt just gratitude. I felt like I'm so grateful to have gotten to this point and to be able to share this story with so many more people, and to have someone like Jim starring in it. It just was like, it was an embarrassment of riches.
That's very sweet to say. I'm realizing I've never allowed myself to fully imagine what it would be like to be doing what he did. I think that's one of those, there's a few little things like this that I think I made sure to stop myself from doing for fear that it would somehow affect or inhibit what I was doing. You know what I mean? Like trying to put myself in Michael's shoes. I was trying to put myself in Michael's shoes for a major chunk of his life he had written down. I don't think I could have, and I'm still realizing I haven't yet really thought about what it's like to put myself in his shoes for going through this experience. And as I'm thinking about it, I understand why. It's enormous. It's enormous watching your life reflected back at you.
Again, that must be just totally nuts. Playing a real life person, and there you are sitting right there next to him, playing that person, and they're in that interview, they were sitting side by side. So it's just kind of fun to have that go on and think, you don't want to do a parody of somebody because you're still making it yourself, but you're not trying to do just an imitation, because not everything in this movie, like the guy said earlier, happened per se. It's just they had to, squish it together to make the movie cohesive. You know, you can't put down every conversation exactly word for word, just a general idea. But still, playing somebody in real life and having them on the set watching you play, you know, what happened to you, that must be really just odd in the head. And it's just so cool to see Jim Parsons. Who would have ever thought way back in the beginning days of Big Bang, oh, extremely talented, but you never thought that, man, this guy has some serious acting chops. I mean, it shows in all the stuff he's done, but it's so cool to see him be able to do other projects, not just one character, because he's obviously has done other things and he has such a massive talent. And it's just going to be so fun to watch him as time moves on. More projects he does and things that he wants to do, especially now when you have power. I don't know if that's the right word, but you have the respect of your people, of a whole community of acting and all that stuff. Now you can start saying, these are the kind of roles I want to make. I don't want to do just a carbon copy of Sheldon or comedies or whatever. He could take on real drama, like stuff you could sink your teeth into. And I can't imagine as a performer how good it is to get out of that cycle and say, yes, I am an actor. I'm not just one character. And that must be tough for anybody in that field because people get used to you in one kind of role, and that's what they sometimes keep expecting of you. But that's what's making this whole era of movies great, with movies, independent films, platforms. Artists can now go places that they couldn't go to 10 years ago because the studios always just wanted, you're going to play this kind of role, this is what's expected of you. So I'm just pumped that he's making movies like this, and other artists are too. It's just wonderful to see. Now, if you want to watch the TV version of this, because you can see the interviews and the scenes, go to Bloomington, Minnesota's webpage, or the shortened version of it is this, bit.ly/cinemajudge, bit.ly/cinemajudge. This and several other shows are on demand. You can watch anytime you want. Well, I hope you enjoyed our in-depth look at Spoiler Alert. Now, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, any way to improve the show, contact me, cinemajudge@hotmail.com, or Instagram, TikTok, whatever you feel like doing, I'm there. I would love your feedback because I can't grow if I don't know. So if you have ideas how to improve the show, I'm always open to ideas. But now, it's one of my favorite parts of the show, and if you're a constant listener, you know what this is. It's shout-out time. This is where I give a shout-out to people who listened to the last episode. And if you have listened to past episodes and you say, hey, why didn't you mention me? Those ones is impossible to find out who, what, when, where, all that stuff. It's much easier just to see the last episode. But don't think for 1 second when I see past catalogs show up that, hey, some people watch this one listen to this one from a year, 2 years ago. I still get so pumped. I'm like, yes, somebody listened to an episode from however long ago. I truly appreciate that, and I love every second of it. But this is a shout out for people who listened to the last episode. So wherever, whenever, or whatever you're doing, this is for you. And every one of you guys, some of you on this list, you show up absolutely every episode. And I just salute you. I mean, I you know what, I can't even put it into words. But just because I blow by the city or state or country doesn't mean that when I see that pop up, I'm not on my feet giving a giant hoop hoop hurrah. So here it goes. Everybody from the United States, United Kingdom, and Germany, you guys are fantastic. United Kingdom, you guys turned out a lot in this one. So thanks a lot. Minneapolis, Minnesota, Brighton and Hove, Duluth, Minnesota, Pasadena, California, Littleton, Colorado, Elk River, Minnesota, Farmington, Minnesota, Holyoke, Mass, Cottage Grove, Minnesota. Now, I'm gonna try my best on this one. This is from Virginia. Tappahannock, Virginia. Is that right, guys? Well, whatever it is, Virginia, you're awesome. Roberts, Wisconsin, St. James, Minnesota, and Frankfurt AM, Maine, Hesse. That's just to name a few of you guys. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for tuning in. Whether it's a blockbuster, independent film, you guys are always there listening, and it just makes me just giddy. Because here I am just sitting in the basement late at night, just talking to nobody. But wherever you are, you're listening to it, whether it's 2 days from now, 2 years from now. But it's just so cool that that's the magic of movies. It brings everybody together, and it's just awesome. Now, today's bourbon toast goes out to everybody from the LGBTQ community. I have so many friends part of that community, and I can't even imagine the struggle you guys have gone through trying to pass laws, trying to just live your life. Just live your life. So to everyone out there who's had to fight, scratch, do everything you can just to live, this is for you. And there's one more group I want to thank. Since this movie deals with cancer, I personally want to say to everybody out there who's dealing with the situation, I'm thinking of you. I understand. I personally am dealing with a situation in my life. Currently, my wife is dealing with her own struggle with melanoma for the last couple of years. So I know what kind of burden that can be. And since this movie deals with that, I just wanted to say I'm there. So to all of you, cheers. But now it's the music section. This is the section that I tell you what I was listening to when I was making the TV version of this, which becomes the podcast. Because obviously when I'm doing this, I can't have anything in the background. It's impossible. But when I'm making a TV version, there's no limit. I'm just cranking in tunes, just having a great time. It's my happy place. I got music and movies. What more do you need? And then for each movie, sometimes you have to get in a certain mood, or sometimes I just randomly go to my little device here and give it a spin, and I go, okay, whatever it stops on, I'm listening to them. This week, I threw down a little Queen, and we all need little Queen from time to time. So I first listened to their 1981 greatest hits. That's with all of them they're all sitting down with all their jackets on. And clearly I wasn't done with the show then. And then I went to the 76 album, A Day at the Races. And then I went to the 1975 album, A Night at the Opera. These guys, what don't they have? What can't they do? When you just want to have just a great time, you have to throw down some Queen. So if you haven't listened to Queen in a while, give it a go. Why not, right? Well, that is it. My glass is full. I'm thirsty. So cheers to you and to the movies. So until next time, be well, be good, and I'm gone. I'm Jeff. Thanks for listening to The Cinema Judge.